Hola. Da. I can't do better than Mandela. I was a journalist for 15 years. I couldn't then, and I still can't. But I can say this: there was a marvelous piece in the Guardian a few weeks ago explaining what a wonderful season Tottenham Hotspur have done. They've been the most exciting. They've scored very many goals. They were just the most thrilling team to watch. And I agree with that. But the last line said, but they may still finish behind us. So the next day we had St. Tottenham's Day. But you haven't met violence. Colleagues, friends, I was given 10 minutes. Sorry for that. I was given 10 minutes because, and I'm going to try and squeeze it to 11 because I want to wrap up this. And I want to cast it eventually towards the end in some scholarly terms, because this is what I'm paid to do and was employed to do. So let me take the standout letters from the speakers. Let me thank them immensely. There are times when I think, as with our students at the moment, they don't realize quite the profound moment that they have in their hands. So let me then say, our contributors today don't quite know, and this is not to undermine them, how profound their contributions have been, and what great value we as people in academia take from it, right? But what I've isolated are a set of issues that have stood out. And the things that you will notice automatically, those of you who are trained in economics, is that it's things like imagination, inspiration, courage, risk, humility, respect, passion, and a deep social commitment. Now, these aren't landmines that I've laid for the rest of the talk. One of the things that we're trying to achieve at Nelson Mandela Metropolitan University is curriculum renewal. And as we go along, we'll look at the rationalist model that underpins neoclassical economics. And how does the rational model explain social commitment? How did it explain respect, humility? My argument here is that with extreme difficulty. But let me then tell you what it is, try and explain what it is that we're trying to achieve, and I know we will, in the business and economic sciences. We want to bring together our faculties in a deeper engagement in teaching and learning and knowledge production. We need to recognize, we'd like our students to recognize and understand and strengthen the relationships between issues that seem so separate. Those of you who've, I'm not trying to get hits because it's a newspaper and it's published in the past. I'm writing a column for the Herald in the last 3 weeks, and one of the things that I've tried to raise is the inseparability of politics and economics. These are not non-overlapping magisterium. So, in a previous incarnation, before, years after I was a very poor journalist, and after I did a doctorate, I was in the National Planning Commission. So just anecdotally, let me just say, one of the ironies of our society is that we're a very small pool of intellectuals in South Africa. But that doesn't mean we're not an inspirational and quite noisy bunch. I'll give you an example. I worked as a journalist for 15 years. One of my editors, assistant editor, in the 80s, was Tammy Mazwai, the man who spoke here this morning. One of my colleagues was Mondli Makai, who spoke here. I worked in the National Planning Commission for 5 years with Minister Mandela, and one of the commissioners was Bridget Casa. So, on the one part, I think I'm really proud to have been consistently part of this group. But one of the things that we're trying to do, let me come back to the National Development Plan, and the way we'll be changing our curriculum, is to try and understand the way that each of these discrete issues fit together. How does healthcare improve education? How does education assist job creation? Now, to some of us, these things seem nonsensical. But we have to start bringing this into our teaching. And especially since the rationalism that so underpins the economics model has been going through a difficult period, to say the least, because of the current crisis in the global economy. It cannot explain, for instance, how I placed my first vote ever for an ex-convict. Some society, ex-convicts can't even vote. I voted for a treason, someone who committed treason. One of our finest minds, is an ex-con. It speaks of giving people chances, expanding the horizon of possibilities of our students, of our young people, and tapping and letting loose their imagination. That's why you get Alan Craig. That's how you get Mandela. You inspire. So we need to understand how these things all fit together and how they will make us a better country. And this begins with education. So there are some fundamental questions that I've had during the National Development Plan process. Currently is how gender, age, class, poverty, inequality, and climate change, and especially food insecurity, influence business, influence society, influence education. I'll give you a little example, which is my studies in global finance and my work at the World Bank. When the East Asian crisis occurred where it did in Bangkok, they found that 1,000 kilometers away in rural Indonesia, children were failing in their exams. The relationship was quite simple. Their parents had less money to pay for food, and as your nutrition levels drop, so do your concentration levels. That's a very simple example. So we need to understand the relationship between these factors. And that goes to what Mandela said. Nobody's born a CEO. Not everyone has the privilege of being born a leader. I agree with Mandela in that sense. But where you are born, the conditions you are born in cannot determine your destiny. Otherwise, I'd be a Tsotsi in Eldorado Park with no copy in my back pocket still. I said it, so I was 15 years old. But we continue to build ourselves, and we use the community around us. See, where you're born, your race, your class, your gender should not be your destiny. So, what then is leadership? I have to close down. I'm still good with time. There are times when each one of us leads, times when we have to follow. A great deal of it has to do with humility. Doing nothing as an active citizen. Dr. Tommy Mazawai spoke of active leadership, active citizenry earlier. Active citizenship, which former Minister Manuel always explained, was the government can build a school, but parents should make sure their children go to school. The local government can put a trash can, but we should really put our trash in the trash can. So that's what engaged citizens. We must do as active citizens. We have a responsibility to and an obligation to the community. Invite Humility then is a vital ingredient. This is what I learned from a lot of the speakers today. Alan Craig spoke about how many times he's failed. But he's not measured, I want to believe, by his failures. His marriage is measured by the amount of times he got up and dusted himself and started again. So, when Dijan went to prison, let me do a little colloquialism. I spent the time in the US teaching and learning. And somebody always said, why do you black people dance when you're protesting? And I said, you know, there's nothing wrong with being black. What do you want us to go do? Sit and cry all the time? Because we're black. Dijan went to prison. He didn't say, oh, well, in prison, life's over. We regenerate our spirit, we use our imagination, and we build a future. And that's why we have people like Ismail, Mandela, and people like Mandela. Right? Some of us worked hard to get here. So we deal with each other then across classes, across genders. It's a transcendental type of leadership. And this is how we get it right. And this is then one of my tasks as Executive Dean of Business Economic Sciences, is to close the gap between theory and practice, to mentor, promote the next generation of generations and leaders, to address our national development objectives and resist the temptation and the seductiveness of philosophizing and theorizing simply for the sake of it. Those of you who are Marxists might recognize it was the old crusty old guy who said responsibility is not to philosophize but to change the world. But there are warnings that I give myself, and I often try to instill, is ensure that the next generation of leaders is not drawn from the elites of the past. So there's a constant need to produce new ideas, practices, and leaders. This is what we do in education. And I always remind myself never to treat people as means to an end. So, in conclusion then, I want to raise two critical points, which I have to. It's the nature of engagement. The idea of skyscrapers is quite marvelous, it works very well. But it's that idea, it's like a rising tide lifts all boats. But it doesn't tell you whether we're talking about rickety old boats, big boats, boats with navigating systems, how much water, how high, are there rocks in the coast? So it works well rhetorically. Because the higher you build skyscrapers, the deeper you need foundations. And it's in education that our foundations are built. That is why I'm in education today. It's also perfectly in order to stress that the inventiveness, the creativity, and the entrepreneurial spirit of the private sector. I want to direct you to the work of economist Mariana Mazzucato, who wrote a book called The Entrepreneurial State. And I don't think you'll be surprised to know that our internet today, the modems we use, the smartphones we use, were all inventions into which the state took the lead. The problem, of course, here is, careful, it says that please check against delivery, is the distrust. The trust deficit we have in South Africa in terms of the state and the private sector. That can be addressed on that. So, what we hear today then are deeply instilled values of humanity, things that make us human, humility, trust, social consciousness, awareness, understanding our neighbors. Right? And neoclassical models can't explain these things to us. And this is part of objectives. So to the people who supported us, Price Waterhouse, Standard Bank, the Herald, the Times Media, Metro, Security Service, and all participants, consider yourselves as part of generating knowledge and advancing our national objectives in this country, and not as sponsors. Otherwise, I reduce you to money bags. You're doing a lot more than that. Thank you very much.